What happens when a seasoned broadcaster refuses to back down from royal protocol, and a duke's carefully crafted public image begins to crumble under relentless questioning? You won't believe what unfolds when Piers Morgan decides to strip away the diplomatic niceties and confront Prince Harry with the hard truths that no other interviewer has dared to address. Last night's explosive confrontation left audiences stunned as years of suppressed tension finally erupted into the most dramatic television moment of the year. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when royal composure meets journalistic firepower. The studio lights blazed with their usual intensity as Prince Harry settled into the guest chair opposite Piers Morgan, but something felt different from the moment the cameras started rolling. Morgan's trademark penetrating stare seemed more focused than usual, his questions sharper, more pointed. What began as pleasantries quickly dissolved into something far more dangerous as Morgan refused to play by the unwritten rules that usually govern royal interviews. "Your Royal Highness," Morgan began, his voice carrying that familiar edge that regular viewers know signals trouble ahead. "Let's talk about accountability. You've spent years criticizing the institution that made you who you are, but when do we start discussing your own role in the breakdown of family relationships?" Harry's practiced smile faltered for just a moment, a micro-expression that Morgan's cameras caught with ruthless precision. "Piers, I think that's a rather simplistic way to frame a complex situation. The institution has serious issues that needed addressing, and speaking truth shouldn't be controversial." But Morgan wasn't interested in diplomatic deflections. He leaned forward, his voice gaining momentum like a prosecutor, closing in on a key witness. "Speaking truth? Is that what we're calling it now? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like a calculated campaign to destroy your family's reputation while building your own brand in Hollywood. Every interview, every documentary, every book deal seems designed to maximize damage while maximizing profit." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees as Harry's facade of relaxed confidence began to crack. His media training kicked in, but Morgan had clearly done his homework, anticipating every carefully rehearsed response. "That's not fair, Piers, and frankly, it's beneath you," Harry replied, his voice tightening almost imperceptibly. "My family and I have been through tremendous trauma, and sharing our story was necessary for healing and to prevent others from going through what we experienced." Morgan's laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Trauma? Let's talk about trauma, shall we? What about the trauma inflicted on your grandmother during her final years? What about the trauma inflicted on your father as he prepared to become king while dealing with public attacks from his own son? What about the trauma inflicted on your brother, who had to watch his family being torn apart on international television?" The questions hit like hammer blows, each one designed to strip away another layer of Harry's carefully constructed narrative. The prince's composure was visibly cracking now, his hands gripping the arms of his chair as Morgan continued his relentless assault. "You want to talk about accountability?" Harry shot back, his voice rising slightly. "Let's talk about the accountability of a media that drove my mother to her death and then turned those same tactics on my wife. Let's talk about the accountability of an institution that protected my uncle while throwing my wife to the wolves." Morgan's eyes lit up with the predatory gleam of a journalist who's just been handed the opening he was waiting for. Ah, there it is. The victim narrative. Always someone else's fault, isn't it? Never any acknowledgement that your own choices, your own actions, your own words might have contributed to the situation you find yourself in. The studio audience, initially sympathetic to the royal guest, began to shift uncomfortably as they witnessed something unprecedented: a member of the royal family being systematically dismantled on live television by a host who refused to show the deference they were accustomed to seeing. "My choices?" Harry's voice was becoming strained now, the careful modulation of his media training giving way to genuine emotion. "My choice was to protect my family. My choice was to step away from a toxic environment that was literally killing my wife. Those weren't choices, Piers. They were survival instincts." Morgan pressed his advantage like a boxer who sensed his opponent is hurt. "Survival instincts? Or convenient excuses? Because it's fascinating how these survival instincts always seem to coincide with lucrative media deals. Netflix, Spotify, book contracts. It's almost as if the trauma narrative has become a very profitable business model. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Harry's face flushed red, his carefully maintained composure finally beginning to crack in a way that made compelling television but represented a public relations disaster of epic proportions. "How dare you," Harry said, his voice barely controlled. "How dare you reduce my family's pain to a business transaction? You have no idea what we've been through, what we've sacrificed, what we've lost." But Morgan wasn't finished. He had drawn blood and could sense the complete breakdown was within reach. "What you've lost? Let's talk about what you've lost. You've lost the respect of your grandmother before she died. You've lost your relationship with your father and brother. You've lost the support of the British people who once loved you. But tell me, what exactly have you gained? Besides money, of course." The question was devastating in its simplicity and brutal in its accuracy. Harry sat silent for a moment, visibly struggling to formulate a response that wouldn't make his situation worse. The cameras captured every second of his internal struggle, every flicker of doubt that crossed his face. "I've gained my freedom," he finally said, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I've gained the ability to speak my truth without fear of retaliation." Morgan's smile was predatory now, sensing that his prey was wounded and vulnerable. "Freedom? Is that what we're calling exile? Because that's what this really is, isn't it? You've been exiled from your own family, your own country, your own identity. And instead of taking responsibility for the choices that led to that exile, you've decided to monetize your grievances and turn family dysfunction into entertainment." The studio fell silent, except for the hum of cameras and the barely audible sound of Harry's labored breathing. The confrontation had reached a critical juncture, and everyone present could sense that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. But Morgan had one more devastating blow to deliver, and as he prepared to land it, the tension in the room became almost unbearable. Morgan leaned back in his chair with the calculated confidence of a chess master about to deliver checkmate. His voice dropped to a near whisper, forcing everyone in the studio to lean forward to catch his words. "Let me ask you something, Harry. Something I don't think anyone has had the courage to ask you directly." The pause that followed stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. "Do you actually believe the things you're saying? Or have you convinced yourself that playing the victim is easier than admitting you might have been wrong?" The question landed like a physical blow. Harry's face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, hurt, and something that looked dangerously close to panic. For a moment, it seemed as though he might not respond at all, but then something shifted in his demeanor. The careful mask of royal composure didn't just slip, it shattered completely. "Wrong?" Harry's voice cracked slightly on the word. "Wrong about what exactly? Wrong about protecting my wife from racist attacks? Wrong about wanting my children to grow up free from the toxicity that destroyed my mother? Tell me, Piers, what exactly was I wrong about?" Morgan's response was swift and merciless. "You were wrong about thinking you could have it both ways. Wrong about believing you could trash your family publicly while expecting them to welcome you back with open arms. Wrong about assuming the British people would support you when you turned your back on them. But most of all, you were wrong about thinking that playing the martyr would somehow absolve you of responsibility for your own choices." The studio audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the brutal honesty of the exchange. This wasn't the polite, deferential questioning that royal interviews typically featured. This was raw, unfiltered confrontation, and Harry was clearly unprepared for it. "Responsibility?" Harry laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in the sound. "You want to talk about responsibility? Where was the royal family's responsibility when my wife was being subjected to daily character assassination? Where was their responsibility when she was having suicidal thoughts and they refused to get her help?" Morgan's eyes glittered with the satisfaction of a hunter who successfully baited his prey. "There it is again, always deflecting, always pointing fingers." But here's what I find fascinating. You talk about your wife's mental health struggles, which are undoubtedly serious and deserving of compassion. But what about the mental health impact your actions have had on your own family members? What about your father's well-being during his cancer treatment, while dealing with his son's public attacks? What about William's stress levels, as he watched his brother systematically destroy family relationships on international television? The questions came in rapid succession, each one designed to corner Harry further. The prince was visibly struggling now, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the chair arms. His media training, which had served him well in countless previous interviews, seemed to have completely abandoned him in the face of Morgan's relentless assault. "That's different," Harry said weakly, but his voice lacked conviction. "They had institutional support. They had the entire establishment backing them up. We had nothing." Morgan's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "Nothing? You had multi-million-dollar Netflix deals. You had Oprah Winfrey giving you a global platform. You had the American media treating you like conquering heroes. You had Hollywood celebrities rallying to your cause. If that's nothing, I'd hate to see what you consider adequate support." The studio felt electric with tension as the confrontation entered dangerous territory. Harry's composure was hanging by a thread, and everyone present could sense that complete breakdown was imminent. Morgan seemed to recognize this too, because his next words were delivered with surgical precision. "But here's what really troubles me about your narrative," Morgan continued, his voice gaining intensity. "You paint yourself as some kind of heroic figure, fighting against an oppressive system. But from where I'm sitting, it looks more like a privileged individual who couldn't handle being told no for the first time in his life. The moment the royal family refused to bend to your every demand, you took your toys and went home. Worse than that, you decided to burn the house down on your way out." Harry's face had gone pale, then flushed red with anger. His breathing became more labored, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed like he might have some kind of medical episode on live television. But instead of backing down, Morgan pressed his advantage even further. "And the most tragic part of all this," Morgan said, his voice now heavy with what sounded like genuine disappointment, "is that you had everything. You were the people's prince. You had their love, their respect, their admiration. Your military service was exemplary. Your charity work was inspiring. You could have been a force for tremendous good in the world. But instead, you chose to throw it all away for what? For the right to complain publicly about how hard your privileged life has been?" The words hung in the air like an indictment. Harry sat motionless for several seconds, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he struggled to maintain some semblance of control. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but the microphones picked up every word. "You don't understand," he said, and for the first time in the interview, he sounded genuinely vulnerable rather than defensive. "You have no idea what it's like to grow up in that environment, to have every aspect of your life scrutinized, controlled, manipulated, to watch your mother die because of that system, and then be expected to smile and pretend everything is fine." Morgan's expression softened slightly, but his words remained sharp. "I don't understand. Let me tell you what I understand. I understand that millions of people around the world would give anything to have the opportunities you've had. I understand that your mother, despite her tragic death, was beloved because she used her platform to help others rather than to settle scores. And I understand that you've taken that legacy and twisted it into something she would be ashamed of." The mention of his mother was the final straw. Harry's face contorted with rage, and he half rose from his chair before catching himself. "Don't you dare," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "Don't you dare invoke my mother's memory to attack me. You have no right. No right at all." Morgan remained perfectly calm in the face of Harry's explosion. "I have every right to point out the contrast between what she represented and what you've become. She used her pain to heal others. You're using your pain to hurt your own family. She brought people together. You're tearing them apart. She protected the monarchy even when it failed to protect her. You're trying to destroy it from the outside because you couldn't reform it from within." The studio was now charged with an energy that felt dangerous, volatile. Harry was on the edge of completely losing control. and Morgan showed no signs of letting up. The confrontation had moved far beyond normal interview boundaries, into something that resembled a public intervention or, more accurately, a public execution. But Morgan had one final, devastating point to make, and as he prepared to deliver it, everyone in the room held their breath. Morgan's voice when he spoke was quieter than before, but somehow more menacing. "Here's what I think happened, Harry. I think you met someone who told you exactly what you wanted to hear, that all your problems were someone else's fault, that you were the victim, that the world owed you something. And instead of being the man your mother raised you to be, instead of facing your demons and growing from them, you chose the easy path. You chose to blame everyone else and run away." The words hit Harry like physical blows. His face cycled through expressions of shock, hurt, and mounting rage. "You think you know me?" he said, his voice rising dangerously. "You think you understand what I've been through? What my family has been through?" "I think I understand enough," Morgan replied coolly. "I understand that you've spent years attacking people who can't fight back because of their positions. I understand that you've monetized your family's private pain for public consumption. And I understand that deep down, you know everything I'm saying is true, which is why you're so angry right now." Harry shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. The sudden movement sent a ripple of tension through the room, with security personnel subtly shifting their positions. "This is unbelievable," Harry said, pacing behind his chair like a caged animal. "You bring me here under the pretense of a respectful interview, and then ambush me with character assassination." Morgan remained seated, his calm demeanor making Harry's agitation appear even more pronounced. "Character assassination? I'm simply asking you to account for your actions. Something that apparently no one in your new life has had the courage to do." "Account for my actions?" Harry's voice cracked with incredulity. "I protected my wife from a racist institution and a toxic media environment. I protected my children from the same fate that befell my mother. Those weren't actions that need accounting for. They were moral imperatives." The response seemed to energize Morgan, who leaned forward with renewed intensity. "Moral imperatives? Let's talk about moral imperatives. What about the moral imperative to honor your grandmother during her final years instead of causing her stress and heartache? What about the moral imperative to support your father during his cancer diagnosis instead of adding to his burdens? What about the moral imperative to maintain family unity instead of weaponizing private conversations for public consumption?" Each question landed like a precision strike, and Harry's composure cracked further with each one. "Stop," he said, his voice barely controlled. "Just stop. You don't get to lecture me about family obligations when you've built your career on exploiting people's pain for entertainment." Morgan's smile was razor sharp. "At least I'm honest about what I do. I don't pretend to be on some noble crusade while settling personal scores. I don't claim to be protecting people while simultaneously destroying them. And I don't wrap my vindictiveness in the language of social justice and mental health awareness." That was the breaking point. Harry's face contorted with fury, and he slammed his hand down on the table between them with such force that the glasses of water jumped. "Enough!" he shouted. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this garbage from someone who wouldn't know integrity if it bit him on the arse." The studio erupted in shocked murmurs, but Morgan's expression remained unchanged. If anything, he looked satisfied, like a matador who had successfully provoked the bull into charging. "There it is," he said quietly. "The real Harry. Not the carefully media-trained prince, not the wounded victim, but the entitled, angry man who can't handle being challenged." Harry was breathing heavily now, his face flushed red with rage and humiliation. "You want to see the real Harry? Fine. The real Harry is someone who had the courage to walk away from a corrupt system that you and people like you prop up with your sycophantic coverage. The real Harry chose love over duty, truth over tradition, and authenticity over keeping up appearances." Morgan's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "Authenticity? Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've simply traded one set of handlers for another. The only difference is that your new handlers tell you what you want to hear instead of what you need to hear." The observation struck home, and Harry's anger seemed to transform into something more desperate. "You know what? I'm done. I'm done with this circus. I'm done with your twisted version of journalism, and I'm done pretending that people like you deserve any respect or consideration whatsoever." He began moving toward the edge of the interview area, but Morgan wasn't finished. "Walk away, Harry. It's what you do best, isn't it? When things get difficult, when people ask hard questions, when reality doesn't match your narrative, you just walk away. From your military career, from your royal duties, from your family, and now from this interview. The pattern is clear for anyone willing to see it." Harry stopped dead in his tracks, his back still turned to Morgan. When he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. "My military career? How dare you? I served my country with honor. I put my life on the line while you sat behind a desk, making snide comments about people better than you'll ever be." "You served admirably," Morgan conceded, "which makes your current behavior all the more disappointing. The Harry who served in Afghanistan had character, had integrity, had courage. That Harry would be ashamed of the man you've become." The words seemed to physically stagger Harry. He turned around slowly, his face a mask of hurt and rage. "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about courage or integrity or service. All you know is how to tear people down for ratings." Morgan stood up for the first time during the interview, his full presence now commanding the room. "I know that courage isn't running away when things get tough. I know that integrity isn't rewriting history to make yourself look better. And I know that service isn't using your platform to settle personal grudges while claiming moral superiority." The two men faced each other across the studio space, the tension so thick it was almost visible. Harry's hands were clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, it seemed like he might actually resort to physical violence. Instead, he took a deep, shuddering breath and spoke with cold finality. "This interview is over," he said, beginning to remove his microphone with shaking hands. "I came here in good faith, hoping for a substantive conversation about important issues. Instead, I walked into an ambush designed to humiliate and attack me personally. I won't dignify this character assassination with my continued presence." Morgan watched calmly as Harry fumbled with the microphone pack. "Running away again, Your Royal Highness? How very predictable." Harry's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "I'm not running away. I'm refusing to participate in your sick little game. There's a difference, though I don't expect someone like you to understand it. The only game here," Morgan replied evenly, "is the one you've been playing for years. The victim game, the blame game, the everyone else is wrong game. And you've finally met someone who won't play along." With the microphone finally removed, Harry straightened to his full height and looked directly into the main camera. "To anyone watching this, I want you to know that this is exactly the kind of toxic behavior I've been talking about. This is why my family and I had to step away. This is the poison that killed my mother and nearly killed my wife." He turned back to Morgan with undisguised contempt. "History will judge which one of us was right, Piers, and I'm confident it won't be you." With that, Prince Harry strode toward the studio exit, his security detail quickly falling into step behind him. The studio remained silent, except for the clicking of cameras and the hum of equipment. Morgan returned to his seat, straightening his tie with deliberate calm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the camera, his voice steady despite the explosive confrontation that had just concluded, "that was Prince Harry, showing once again that, when faced with difficult questions about his own behavior, his preferred response is to storm off rather than provide answers. We'll be right back after this break." As the studio lights dimmed and the commercial break sign flashed, the shocked murmurs of the audience finally began to fill the silence. The confrontation was over, but its reverberations would be felt for years to come. Morgan had gotten exactly what he wanted, a complete breakdown of royal composure that would dominate headlines and social media for weeks. Harry, meanwhile, had walked directly into the trap, confirming every criticism that had been leveled against him through his explosive reaction and dramatic exit. The interview that was supposed to rehabilitate his image had instead provided the most damning evidence yet of his inability to handle scrutiny or take responsibility for his actions. As the camera stopped rolling and the dust began to settle, one thing was clear. This was a confrontation that neither man would soon forget, and that the public would be talking about for years to come.